Welcome to Justice Beyond the Bench, a podcast by the International Association of Women Judges. I'm Jane Charles Voltaire.
And I'm Amy Lewis. In this series, we spotlight women across the global justice sector who are leading efforts to advance gender equality, strengthen judicial systems, and champion inclusive leadership.
From courtrooms to communities, we'll hear powerful stories and unpack the strategies shaping women's leadership in law and the judiciary. It's time to go beyond the bench.
Today, we welcome Justice Nadia Kangaloo to the conversation. She is president of the Caribbean Association of Women Judges, a member of Trinidad and Tobago Association of Women Judges, and a High Court judge of the Judiciary of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago since 2013, where she presides in the Civil Division. Justice Kangaloo is also a board member of the Judicial Education Institute of Trinidad and Tobago. She has been at the forefront of advancing judicial wellness across the region, leading transformative efforts to destigmatize mental health in the judiciary, creating safe, peer-supported spaces where judges can speak openly about stress, burnout, and emotional resilience, redefining leadership through the lens of care and well-being.
Justice Kangaloo is also the visionary behind We Wellness, a pioneering peer support initiative designed by judges for judges. From training sessions to curated wellness events, she's helping judicial officers across the region care not only for the public they serve, but also for themselves. Her leadership reminds us that well-being is not a luxury. It's essential to justice. We are honored to welcome her to today's episode, Balancing the Scales, Women Leaders, and Judicial Wellness. Welcome, Justice Kangaloo.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jane and Amy, for having me. It's my absolute pleasure and honor to be here with you.
We're very excited for today's discussion. Justice Kangaloo, your journey bridges law, leadership, and wellness. So let's go back to the beginning. What first inspired you to pursue a legal career, and how did your early work in property law shape your path to the bench?
So I had my parents fix a very strong moral compass for me as a young kid. They were very strict, but in a sweet and gentle way. But I always had a very clear sense of what was right and wrong. And I suppose that was inevitable, that it would lead me to be driven by a strong sense of justice. I've actually worked in intellectual property law because I've always had a deep curiosity about how ideas and innovation and indeed creative identity are protected. As a child, I asked a lot of questions. Some may argue too many. I don't think there are ever too many questions, but I've had an avaricious appetite as well for reading. And I think it's a combination of all of those factors that naturally led me to intellectual property law. And it's a field that continues to inspire me. I did do early work in intellectual property law when I was in practice for 20 years. And there's a wonderful intersection when you practice that type of law, creativity, and indeed economic empowerment. And we have, of course, in Trinidad and Tobago, a really rich cultural context. So whether it's a soca song or a traditional cultural expression, a work of mass, of masquerade, IP law affirms that creativity matters, and in my view, it deserves to be valued and protected. So it's that sense of purpose and nuance, I think, in the practice of IP law that has shaped, indeed, how I approach judging. So you sort of balance the technical rigor that comes with the practice of law, but within a human context.
That's so fascinating, Justice Kangaloo, thinking about the intersection and the way it's kind of woven this path for you. And like you said, balancing the rigor with the human aspect. It's so critical. And we also know that you served on the Board of Judicial Education. So I was wondering as well, what did that experience teach you about leadership, mentorship, or even the role of continuous learning in the judiciary?
So I am a serving member of the Board of Judicial Education it's the Institute the Judicial Education Institute of Trinidad and Tobago. And what that's taught me, I suppose, is first of all that being a leader in the judiciary isn't necessarily about titles. It's about creating a space where judges can learn. and obviously grow, and of course rest. And so it's an insight that's been provided from working with that board that has confirmed my personal view that we never stop learning, and the avenues of continuous adult education that the JI has provided continue to nourish that view for me. The president of the JITT is the Chief Justice, and the chair is Justice Gillian Lucky. And in my view, they're true visionaries. They've ensured that our curriculum and that our faculty, they keep us current on the law, engaged as an entire institution, not just judges, and together in wellness. So I am very proud to be a member of that very dynamic board.
That sounds really exciting, and I think also just kind of serves to elucidate really what we're talking about today, right? This idea of wellness all the way up and down the judicial ladder and across the spectrum of people employed by the judiciary, and the way that we incorporate that balance into our work lives as well.
Absolutely.
It also seems as though, you're talking about a community of judges and those within the judiciary who are trying to really find ways to serve the people that work within the system, as well as then be able to ultimately serve the public that this institution is targeted towards. You now serve as president of the Caribbean Association of Women Judges, a network that I know that has grown exceptionally and exponentially also under your leadership. Can you talk about a little bit of this experience that you've had as president of CAWJ?
It has been, I have to say, Jane and Amy, one of the most satisfying um, parts of my professional career. IP law, sitting as a judge, all of that taken into account, because I have found myself in a community of like minded women. We do have two male members, I will just say that, but mainly women. We now number over 90 persons across the Caribbean region, stretching from Guyana all the way up to the Bahamas. And we that community has taught me that, albeit that as a judge there is a sense of isolation and you can't escape that, the job and the work can be isolating, but I'm part of a community, and I'm part of a community that keeps me grounded. I've come to realize that we have so much to share, and indeed so much in common, despite the fact that we might be across different borders and practicing under different legal systems. We do have a common thread that truly does bind us. And it has been such an enriching experience to lead this dynamic association. There are powerful women judges there. There are new, young judicial officers there, and we all have a voice. And that has really been and continues to be for me an exciting, enriching, and nourishing experience.
We love to hear the role that associations play in creating a sense of community and, as you said, keeping you grounded and separating out the isolation that one can feel as a judge and sitting in that particular role. It seems that you've also had an opportunity to represent the region at global conferences. You talked earlier about your work in IP. How have those international experiences shaped your perspective on regional solidarity and your approach to wellness advocacy then?
So, as an IP judge, I had the honor of being invited to present at a global forum. The World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, hosts yearly a forum for intellectual property judges, and I presented on two occasions at that WIPO forum in 2019 and last year in 2024. And again, what you realize when you go, in particular, to global conferences, even just coming back from the IWG's by 17th biennial in South Africa, that in spite of the fact that we come from far-flung places across the globe, there is, in the practice of law, in the day-to-day activities that we undertake, our experiences as sitting judges, and as the name of this podcast suggests, beyond the bench, do have we do have shared experiences, and we can enrich each other. So we have, of course, again, a spectrum of more experienced judges and less experienced judges. And I have had what I've been able to take away from those international conferences, and indeed from regional conferences where I've attended and spoken specifically on wellness, is that anyone should take the opportunity, first of all, to go to these conferences to enrich your judicial and personal life. I've made such wonderful friends from attending these conferences, who have become, as I say, friends beyond the bench. I was in Australia a couple of years ago to present on a completely different topic, far away from wellness, but having made a connection with an IP judge in Geneva in 2019, was invited to her home to meet her family and share a very special experience with her. So that those types of connections are very important, because they add ultimately to your wellness, again, because they confirm that you're not alone on this journey.
Exactly. And how wonderful to create those connections through your work and still be able to see the human kind of part of these relationships as well.
So, Justice Kangaloo, you're talking about this kind of sense of isolation that judges feel, but also this thread of community and what kind of binds and tethers you together, and these shared experiences, and the way that you kind of find the sanctuary in community. And we know that wellness generally can be a difficult conversation, especially in judicial spaces where strength, composure, impartiality are often prioritized over vulnerability. Um, what are some of the cultural or institutional challenges that you've encountered in trying to center mental health and well being?
So I'm glad, Amy, that you touched on cultural, because, of course, in the Caribbean, as you may know, women play a very significant role in the home, in the wider community, and, of course, even in our judiciaries, we have a number of women. And so women, judges in particular, um, are required to be composed, to be impartial, as you said, and to be above and beyond that, resilient. And of course, that doesn't mean that we're not vulnerable, but there's a culture of stoicism that comes with being a judge, and that runs very, very deep. So the effort has to be made, and effort being the operative word. You have to put hard work in to create spaces where you can be honest about your stress, honest about the reality of burnout. And that takes a lot of building of trust. I tried to do that in a gentle but very persistent way. And that thus far appears to have worked for me.
I completely relate. Not being from the Caribbean, but being from the Midwest of the U.S., I completely relate to that culture of stoicism and how it can be a bit stifling, and this kind of double burden, if you will, that can be placed on women to appear a certain way or to conduct themselves a certain way. Sometimes a double standard, even compared to their male counterparts.
Mhm.
I am
Very true.
curious. Yeah. I am curious though, what impact have you kind of witnessed so far around this? Are there any key moments or responses that kind of stand out to you as you've kind of conducted this work or been working with women judges around this?
Well, Amy and Jane, you've mentioned in your very generous and kind introduction of me at the beginning of this podcast, the We Wellness movement. And for me, that has been a standout moment. We Wellness was it was really me looking at the road race calendar in Trinidad and Tobago and seeing a particular race for an excellent charity, and thinking that would be something I'd like to do with a group of people. Now, usually I do that with my group of friends outside of the judiciary. But in this instance, I thought, why don't I take it to the judiciary and offer it as an option for us to come together as a group in a very informal way, but just as a team building event. And the response to that gentle inquiry floored me. I opened it up to the entire institution, so not just sitting judges and judicial officers. And the response that was received was such that on the day of I made all sorts of arrangements for us to be at the race and to attend, and the friendly banter and the competition that ensued. There was a 5K race and a 15K race, and of course the Chief Justice had to do the 15K race. But it was such fun. It was so enriching. We all felt such a sense, as you do, of accomplishment having completed the race, and for me that stood out. Did not anticipate that I would get so much traction with my very informal invitation. And what has happened as a result of that race, I had to create a chat for us to organize all of the logistics. And that too has grown exponentially. I'm up to yesterday, I was asked to join someone else to the chat, because what we do now is we support and we encourage one another. We post about mental health and about yoga and about upcoming races, and we post pictures of ourselves having done physical feats and other accomplishments. And it has created a space for us to celebrate our wellness journey together. And that really has been impactful for me.
What a wonderful example of taking one initiative and being able to multiply that, and to see then at the end of the day that people are engaged and invested. So, where do you see in some ways the We Wellness initiative going, and how do you see that tying in even to, we're coming up on International Day of Judicial Wellbeing, which is a newly recognized day at the end of July. How do you see all of that tying in?
Well, we have started planning to do another race, but in what has happened as well is, in the support and encouragement that we've given each other, we've started taking better care of ourselves physically and mentally. We're actually putting a purpose to it. So there's a weekly group that gets together and walks together. And again, it's very fluid. For me, what attracts me to the We Wellness concept is that it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It still remains very informal. And it's a template that is easily transferable across the region and indeed globally. But there's someone who has to start it. Someone has to drive it. And that's, I think, where my role is. It's resulted in me reconnecting with members of the judiciary that I may not have had the opportunity to do so, particularly during the period of COVID, and meeting new members of the judiciary and interacting with them, such that albeit that I've not met them in person, when we do have opportunities to meet in person, it feels as if I've known them for a very long time. So I just want to continue, as I said, gently but persistently rolling out that concept of we wellness, of collective responsibility for our wellness, but at the same time emphasizing that, according to the Narrow Declaration as well, that we must take individual care of ourselves.
What a wonderful way of looking at it, collective responsibility. And as you said, it takes someone to drive things, but once you're there, it's something that can be done and perhaps replicated. We are trying to encourage through this podcast, of course, but through other initiatives, to share what our members are doing so that other members in other regions and other continents, countries, can really think about what they can bring to their own judiciary and improve the experience ultimately, not only for women judges, but for judicial actors on the whole. So thank you for being in some ways an ambassador for wellness in the judiciary. And we hope to also continue to work with you on spreading the word, spreading the news on that.
I
very much look forward to that.
Well, I love too what you had to say, Justice Kangaloo, about these informal networks, and it sounds a lot like through the we wellness, through this like physical kind of community, that you're actually breaking down a lot of the hierarchies, that we often see replicated in the judicial system, even among women conducting mentorship programs or things like that, and really breaking that down and making each other accessible to learn from.
That you make an excellent point, Amy, and I don't know that that was necessarily my intention. My intention was just to get us moving. But given my nature and my character, I'm very much about being inclusive and ensuring that there's diversity, so that I think that's integral to who I am as a person, so that if I open up an invitation, I'm not going to limit myself as a result of a hierarchy. And again, because of my character, you said Ambassador Jane. I like to think of myself perhaps as a cheerleader. So with that sort of giddy optimism, people are naturally attracted to anything that Justice Kangaloo might be offering. In other words, they know that they're likely to have a laugh, that they're likely to feel good about themselves at the end of the day, and find themselves in a space where they can be honest. So that, as I say, it takes hard work. This hasn't happened overnight, but I'm so glad that I've been able to create that space for people. And we touched as well on opening up wellness activities to your entire judiciary. And Jane, you talked about the inaugural celebration of the International Day of Judicial Wellbeing that comes up on the 25th of July. Well-being must include your entire institution. It can't just be judges who are well. It has to be everyone, because we all support one another. And so for me as well, as I continue to build out that vision of what we wellness means, it truly does mean we, as in our local parlance, our wellness.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. Justice Kangaloo, you talked a lot about um, you being a cheerleader, and we can hear the energy that you really bring to this. It's a movement, really, right? And I think challenging judges to, yes, be vulnerable, even if it's a quiet vulnerability, and kind of show up as as their whole selves. Like, judges are people too, right? And I think that really goes to the heart of like beyond the bench, right? Like, um, but I was really also wondering, I think you talked a little bit before about your upbringing and this like appetite for justice. And I was wondering if there was also ever a moment early in your career when someone saw potential in you before you saw it in yourself. I think you've spoken about the influence of your parents. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about their role in shaping your values and sense of purpose as a leader and a jurist?
Absolutely. So, I think I've said this is the third time, and I'll say it once more. I'm an only child, not spoilt, but very precocious growing up. And my parents, I grew up in the United Kingdom before coming home to Trinidad and Tobago, where both of my parents were born. But they allowed me, as this young um, child who loved to read and loved to chat and was into acting and all things creative, they gave me such a space to find my authentic self at a very young age, and to give me a confidence that I think they're the ones who saw my potential and encouraged me. But I have to say that early on in my career, particularly on the bench, it was the first patron of the Caribbean Association of Women Judges, the late Justice Desiree Bernard, who attended the launch of the CAWJ. And when we had our business meeting to nominate and vote for that first board of the CAWJ, Justice Bernard nominated me to be treasurer. And I looked at her in horror and I said, Judge, I am absolutely terrible at math. And she said, Nadia, it has absolutely nothing to do with math. I see that you're very organized and you're very confident, and that's all that you need. And here we are 10 years later, and I'm leading that said association. So she definitely saw that potential in me, and that meant a lot. Justice Bernard, there's so many firsts that she achieved in her lifetime, among them being the first female judge to sit on the Caribbean Court of Justice and being the first female Chancellor of Guyana, first female Chief Justice. So that always stands out for me as a moment when someone whose views and who I valued as a legal jurist, endorsing me and having confidence in me. And as you said, Amy, seeing that potential in me, that stands out for me as a moment. But I mean, I can't leave this aspect of our conversation without talking about my mum. I lost my father at a very young age, and my mother single-handedly raised me. And she continues to be at the age of 83, such a resilient woman, but so kind and so patient. And she really has continued to buoy me up in terms of support, and in terms of every morning I get a message from her telling me how much I mean to her. And that's really important to me, having that kind of support.
How
Oh, that's
lovely.
wonderful.
Both the story about Justice Bernard and encouraging you and pushing you maybe a little bit to step outside of what seemed at the time your comfort zone, and look at you today, as you said, in terms of your own leadership for the CEWJ, but also that wonderful reminder, daily reminder from your mother, but such a beautiful tribute also to the work and the legacy that she's built and continues in you in what you're doing.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit then. It seems, you've certainly had these influences, this impact, and the way that you're also thinking about how to shape and how to support and how to build a judiciary that's more resilient and that also respects the human aspect of all of this, and that plays in terms of even how you were thinking about ideas and IP to the We Wellness program. But what advice would you offer to women lawyers, judges, scholars who aspire to also serve on the bench, take leadership roles, also in national, regional, professional associations? What would you tell them then?
Um, Thank you for that question, Jane, because I think it's an important question that needs to be answered time and time again, because it's not often spoken about. It I think that to be a leader doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. I think we need to divest ourselves of the idea that somehow when you see people in leadership positions that they have everything under control. That's not the case. For me, being a leader means having a purpose and executing on that purpose. Being a leader means surrounding yourself with people who will support you, but and support, of course, comes in a number of ways, including saying to you that perhaps this might not be a direction that we want to go in. So having a really good support system is important. You can't do it alone as a leader. I think you have to take a lot of time for introspection, because when you have that moment, you get the inner clarity. And with inner clarity, for me, came digging deep, as Justice Bernard was encouraging me to do all those years ago, to source your potential, figure out what your particular competences was, and to build on those, to hone those. So what I would say to people who were aiming for a position on the bench and or to find themselves in leadership positions is take some time for introspection, find out what works for you, hone your strengths, and then ultimately build on that. And you will find yourself, as I have, on that journey to leadership and eventually to leadership itself. But it has a lot to do with the confidence that comes with mining your inner talents.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for being able to frame it in this way. People aren't perfect, and judges aren't perfect. And I think it's really important to understand that there is a journey and there's a striving towards excellence. But again, reminding ourselves of the humanity in each of us as individuals.
Absolutely. And, I think that especially young women that are earlier in their career, right, or maybe haven't aspired to the level that they want to just yet, like hearing that you can lead and be well, that there's a way to do that, that there's a space for that, and kind of creating the culture that affirms that. And you, Justice Kangaloo, you have created spaces for judges to breathe, to be human, and to connect with one another in ways that do go beyond the courtroom. But what do you think about the long game? So, say 10, 20 years from now, what kind of culture do you hope exists, or do you feel like you're already building in judiciaries because of this work?
Um, I absolutely do think that I'm on that path. As I said, for me, leadership is purpose with execution. So that my purpose has been to ensure that the discussion surrounding well-being becomes something that is built into every judicial system, and it's not just an afterthought or an ad hoc add-on at a conference or during a webinar. I hope for the day when a body of judges and judicial officers gets together not to discuss the latest developments in the law or the latest developments in artificial intelligence and how that is impacting our practice as judges and as lawyers, but a whole conference that is devoted entirely to judicial well-being with
Mm,
the nuanced understanding of what that means, because people often gravitate when they hear well-being towards physical exercise, but when you
mm,
unpack the concept of well-being, it involves financial wellness, physical wellness, emotional, mental, spiritual wellness. These are all part and parcel of what it means to be well. And for me, that would be the culmination of my vision, of my purpose as a wellness cheerleader, as a wellness ambassador, to see judges and judicial officers coming together and not thinking that it's a waste of time to spend time um, learning or encouraging themselves to be well.
I think that's so important, Justice Kangaloo. And, coming from other spaces or thinking about other sectors, especially feminist sectors, or thinking about, nonprofits that are really focused on, survivors or gender based violence or things like that. We talk a lot about compassion in these spaces for ourselves and others. And I think what you're saying is really critical to that.
I think so. At the end of the day, I don't think that we can deliver optimal justice without caring for ourselves first. And I keep emphasizing that it does require work. And oftentimes I recognize that it's not work that we want to do on ourselves. It can be a painful journey in some instances. And one of the things, if I could just circle back to the whole we wellness movement as it's been described by you all now, and I'm going to take that and run with it, as we
please.
say, um, is that this is in our we wellness space. There are no experts, there are no psychologists, there are no psychiatrists, there are no therapists. It's us relying on one another and supporting one another because of our lived shared experience. And for me, that's very powerful as well. And if we accept, as a body of judges, judicial officers, as a judicial institute, as an institution, that if we care for ourselves, then we will be delivering the best possible justice, then my work here is done, as they say.
What a wonderful way of framing it, and again, bringing it back to, the purpose, which is if we want to deliver optimal justice, we have to care for ourselves and, in some ways, put the oxygen mask on for yourself as well before
Exactly. Exactly.
before putting it on anyone else in order to actually be effective. We talk a lot in the Women in Leadership and Law program about, yes, women rising and entering into the judiciary, but this other aspect of thriving. And I think this is so well connected to what you've been working on in terms of wellness initiatives, and how we need to really think, as you said, not only in terms of physical wellness, but also all of the different aspects that encompass what wellness really means, and what somebody showing up for themselves really means. So thank you for that, and thank you for being able to kind of give us also that understanding of the wider sense of what wellness encompasses.
You're welcome.
So we do have a final question for you, and we'd like to close the session today, this wonderful interview with you today, by asking you, in one word, what do you think will have the greatest impact on advancing women's leadership in law?
What an interesting question, Jean. Let me think. For me, voice. Um, Find your voice. That comes from the introspection we spoke about earlier. Hone that voice, um, and speak it at that table, at that anecdotal table that we all know about. Make your voice be heard. In the Caribbean, we have a culture of the oral tradition of passing down stories and experiences. And so it's almost natural that as Caribbean women, we do have a voice, but we've not always had the opportunity to really sit with it and listen to it, and then have it delivered in spaces that matter. So for me, my word is voice. Claim it, hone it, protect it, and pass it on.
Powerful, powerful, and a beautiful way of framing that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this time with Eugene and Amy, and let me commend the IAWJ for this podcast, Beyond the Bench. It's so important. I think we've discussed it, to put a human face on what we do. I think that can only inure to the benefit of anybody who taps into the judicial system.
Oh, well, thank you for that, Justice Kangaloo. We talk a lot about elevating and amplifying women's stories. And as Jean said, you stated that so beautifully around the word voice and the way it resonates for you, even from a cultural perspective. And we're so grateful for you sharing your voice and sharing your story with us, and dare I say, being vulnerable with us. So thank you again, Justice Kangaloo. Thank you for joining us and for your powerful reflections. Your work really does remind us that true leadership in the judiciary isn't only about legal decisions. It's about creating space for humanity and healing. And you've shown how wellness can be a form of justice in itself. So again, thank you so much. We're so grateful that you were able to share with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome, and it's been my absolute pleasure to spend this time with you, and I look forward to the conversation continuing.
Absolutely.
As it will. Yes. Thank you for tuning into Justice Beyond the Bench. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Want to learn more about our work and support our mission? Visit us at iawj.org, where you can explore our programs, join our global network, or make a donation to help advance gender equity in judiciaries around the world. See you next time.